Hello, I'm John Hoyle, and this is a brief presentation on perspectival anamorphic art. Perspectival anamorphic art is centered around one critical art-to-viewer relationship, and that is, of course, perspective. In general, perspective is based on the vantage point from where the viewer observes the work of art. A tabletop, like this image here, can appear in the shape of a square, a diamond, or a trapezoid, depending on where your vantage point is while looking at the table. Now, with its roots in the Renaissance, perspective in works of art is also based on seeing clearly what the artist intended the viewer to gaze upon in the artifact. The Ambassadors by Hans Holbein is considered one of the first perspectival anamorphic works of art where an object was put into the painting that looked distorted until the viewer moved to a specific location to view the correct angle and then unraveled the mysterious object. And as you can see in this image, the ambassadors are there gazing upon the viewer, while at the bottom of the work of art is this object that's very distorted. Can't really tell what this is until you stand at the look at it from the correct perspective from this angle. And as you can see, it is when you stand at the correct spot, it's a skull, or the image of a skull that's in the work of art. And this is from the vantage point. And again, back to it, doesn't look like it makes any sense there, but it looks as if you were to stand to the left and below the image, you would be able to see the skull in view at that point. Modern perspectival anamorphic art has moved away from the canvas and onto sidewalks, rooms, buildings, city blocks, and even complete mountainsides. Julian Beaver is known for his sidewalk chalk creations that defy reality. Now, looking at this angle of his work of art, again, it looks as though this globe is just very distorted, and it certainly isn't round like the world is, but we're not looking at it from the vantage point that the artist wants you to stand at. Seeing the art as intended requires the viewer to go to the vantage point, and then the anamorphosis takes place, and what was distorted is now plain to see, as in this image. It's almost as if there is the work of art is now in a 3D sphere rising up off of the sidewalk. And as you can see at the top here, there's a gentleman standing off in the distance, but it looks like he's very small and standing on top of the world from this vantage point where it takes place. And again, the distortion is from the side, and that's how he had to do the chalk work in that fashion to get from the vantage point this image. Perhaps the most well-known anamorphic artist in the world today is Swiss native Felice Varini. Varini has many works of art throughout Europe, and his canvas again can stretch on city blocks, throughout buildings, and even on mountainsides. But I want to show you one of his works of art, which is called Hewitt Carus, and walk you through this particular work of art from an analysis standpoint. Hewitt Carus is an arched walkway in Versailles, France, and there are multiple relationships of perspective that are seen in this artifact. Now, this is a photograph, but you're standing or you're viewing this from the vantage point. Hewitt Carus appears to be two images or spaces in one. At the vantage point, a curtain of blue squares appears to drape in the foreground of this image. The rest of the image is the actual three-dimensional space that makes up the arched walkway. Strong vectors of graduated arches that continue to get smaller and smaller as you go back to toward the background from the foreground help make up these strong vectors, as well as these light fixtures on the left and on the right as they point down to the center of the doorway in the back. And again, the walkway has these strong vectors as well that point to this almost vanishing point in the back of the arched walkway. kind of draws your eyes down to that, and this is a very symmetrical photograph or position as far as what's remaining of the archway and the walkway. This, however, doesn't allow it to be as symmetrical as the image behind it, these squares. And of course, you know, it would be very easy to do this in Photoshop by simply bringing in just some blue squares and placing them as a pattern on top of this. But I assure you, this photograph is not doctored. This is the way from the vantage point that the artist intended for you to see it. So in reality, paint has been applied to the archway and the door, and when the viewer steps away from the vantage point, the mystery unravels and the illusion is no more. And here is a photograph standing away from the vantage point, and as you can see, the transparent squares are just simply painted blocks of solid color in various positions throughout the hallway. This one right here is very large because it takes up such a great amount of space through the rest of the room, whereas this one really doesn't take up much space. But Verini actually goes in and paints the landscape, the architecture, and to create his works of art. Again, here it is from the vantage point, and stepping away from the vantage point, you just see fragments of paint. That is very familiar with his work. Wanted to show you just one other piece of work from Verini, and I really like this one. Looks as though this room has been taped off for you not to walk through, and this is standing and looking at it from the vantage point, and then when you step away, you see nothing but the fragments that have been painted on the ceiling, the walls, and the floor. This is just a little presentation on perspectival anamorphic art. Thanks. Have a good day.